Hello, this is Alaina Chan, and today I will be using every yellow art supply I have to create a beautiful art piece. I decided to draw my two girls, Zarina the fairy and Angel the Triton Knight. Zarina was created from an Instagram audio that I found about like creating your own fairy OC. And then Angel was created from the first mermaid prompt list that I made for myself because I wanted to do something D&D inspired for mermaid. As you can see in this picture, I totally forgot to draw Zarina's wings, but honestly I feel like that made it a little bit easier to use all of the art supplies so that I didn't get too overwhelmed. I started off with using the watercolors because I thought that it would be a good base for the background. I didn't go too pigmented with those colors. I just tried to fade from the darkest yellow that I had to the lightest yellow that I had. And then I went into the markers. I was really excited to try and figure out how to use all of these markers because I have the skin tone Ohuhu set, and there were lots of yellows in that pack. And it was really fun to try and use all of the yellows and figure out where to put all of these yellow skin tones because I knew that it wouldn't necessarily be on the girl's skin. I really love coming back to characters that I've drawn over and over again. If you have followed me for a while, then you will know that you've seen Zarina and Angel a few times because I use them a lot for my Huevember series. For Huevember, I really like to reuse the same characters for each color, and it's really fun to use my normal drawing schedule to see which colors I'm going to be using for Huevember because I don't do a drawing every single day in Huevember, mostly because I just did that for October and that's really overwhelming. But I'm pretty sure that you have all seen Zarina and Angel a few times due to me using them in Huevember drawings. I decided that even though, for example, Zarina has gray skin and Angel is supposed to have green eyes, that I would just ignore that and try and go for using yellow everywhere instead of trying to do the gray skin and things like that. I did keep Angel's stripes because I feel like that's an integral part of her design, and you will see me working on her stripes later. I'm sure you guys have all noticed, but I really love D&D and try and do a lot of art inspired by D&D. I find Dungeons and Dragons to be a big inspiration for me, mostly because with all of the characters and races or species that are available to create, I feel like you can always make something brand new, even if you use the same race or species and class, you can still make so many different kinds of characters. I love the amount of customization and imagination you can use to create a character. And I feel like there are lots of resources to create a character that I never would have thought of in the first place. And sometimes I'm actually able to use characters that I've created for a drawing challenge to serve as a D&D character in a campaign that I'm going to play in. One character that I was able to reuse for another campaign is the Warforged Bard. I ended up naming her Wisteria, and I had so much fun coming up with a backstory for her and using her and being a little bit unhinged with her character because of her backstory. I thought it was so fun. I also really love fantasy art in general. I feel like it's super fun to design clothes and jewelry, and character design in general is one of my favorite parts of art. I feel like it can be so much fun to look at different inspirations. I have been really into fashion history for a long time, and I know that the Regency era up into the Victorian era are big favorites of mine. I especially love the Victorian era bustle gowns, so you will probably see me using those a lot in Huevember because I just want to draw bustle gowns so bad. But I do love seeing how fashion evolves and changes over time, and it's really fun to use those in the designs that I create. For Zarina and Angel, I decided to go with outfits that resembled what they were originally. For Zarina, it's pretty much exactly what she wore before. I'm just changing the palette a little bit to be more yellow. And then for Angel, she obviously wore armor because she's a knight, but she had really big shoulder plates, so I wanted to use a big giant puffy sleeve to kind of relate back to that. I think the outfits really relate back to what they looked like originally, and I really love calling back to what their personality is like in my mind. I have not played as Zarina or Angel in a campaign or anything like that, so their personality is a little bit underdeveloped for me. But I still find it so fun to go back and revisit them and see how I can change and evolve them. So I definitely love using D&D to create characters and art. I have way more yellow art supplies than I thought that I did because I don't have like a whole collection of Sharpies, for example, but I was surprised that I did have a red and orange Sharpie laying around and that I had an ultra fine tip yellow Sharpie laying around. And I have way more Crayola yellow colored pencils than I thought I did. So it was really fun, like going through all of my art supplies and being like, whoa, I have way more yellow than I ever thought that I did. I thought this time that I would let myself get a little bit closer to the camera and get in there for the details. And I was able to do that without knocking over the camera for the most part, so that's good. And I feel like the line art came out a little bit better than it did for the orange art supply drawing. I'm really glad that I was able to get it to look a little bit more like I wanted it to. I feel like there's still a lot of learning that I need to do for traditional art, mostly because I haven't used traditional art supplies in such a long time. As a teenager, before I got a drawing tablet for Christmas, I used colored pencils a lot. So I feel like colored pencils are my favorite traditional art supply just because I feel like I can kind of go back into my memories and remember how to use them. However, I love using the markers, especially the alcohol based markers. So I definitely want to use those more in the future. I do know for my next post that I will be doing another page from my Art Nouveau coloring book. And I wanted to use watercolors mostly because I knew that it would definitely really go at the paper because the paper is not made for watercolor, but I want to see how it turns out. So I'm excited to work on that next. At one point, I wasn't sure how to use some of my art supplies because I didn't really want to use a lot of fluorescence on the characters themselves. So I decided to do a bunch of really fun flowers and dots in the background because I felt like that would be a good way to use the art supplies and also get more color down on the page in a fun way that I enjoyed. The flowers and the dots were really fun to just spread out everywhere. One art supply I will say that I'm glad I didn't have a lot of was the crayons, mostly because I feel like the crayon should be something that goes on last, just because it's a wax based art supply, and I don't want the wax to stop me from coloring in a section that I want to color on. So it was a little bit difficult to figure out where the crayon was going to go and how I was going to use it, just so that I didn't block myself off from using other art supplies in the same area of the drawing. I will say that I do love using colored pencils to line, mostly because I feel like I have the most control over how my hand moves with that art supply, and I always feel like I get the kind of line work that I want. I think I could also use a pen or markers to get the same effect, but I do really like how you can find a colored pencil that matches the color scheme that you want to go with, and you can more easily find something that will match every color that you put down on the page. So I definitely love using colored pencils for line work. I'm sure you noticed, but I did use the ultra fine tipped Sharpie to do the line work on their faces, mostly because I wanted that to look a little bit different than the line work I was doing on the rest of the drawing. I've been wanting to use gel pens to do highlights on eyes and things like that, but I've noticed that at least the gel pens that I have purchased don't have that super white coverage that I'd like. I feel like using a white Posca pen or using white acrylic paint does the job better because there's always streakiness to the white gel pens that I use. So if you have any suggestions for a white gel pen I should use that actually gets the coverage that I want, let me know and comment down below what brand I should check out. I would also love to know if there are any art supplies that you would suggest I use. So definitely give me a comment down below for any art supplies you want to see me try. I definitely would love to try something new as well. This drawing did take 2 sessions, so obviously there's a little bit of a jump when I go from one session to the other. I was able to do about 50 minutes for the first half, and then it only took me about 10 minutes to finish using all of the acrylic paints at the end. I have enjoyed going back to acrylic paint because I did use acrylics a lot more during my college years, and it's kind of fun to go back. I still feel like my hands are a little bit shaky and I have a harder time getting the line work that I want with a paintbrush. And I don't have a ton of paintbrushes to choose from just because a lot of them have been destroyed from the way that I didn't store them correctly. So being able to have a paintbrush that'll hold the shape that I want it to hold is a little hard for me to find. For a lot of the acrylic paint, since most of the area for the characters was covered, I was excited to use the paint for little details like dots in the background or just adding little things to their outfits. I did want to use the one gold paint that I had to add a little bit of detail and shine to Zarina's outfit because I did feel like some of the jewelry wasn't popping the way that I wanted it to, so I was so excited to add the gold shimmer to it. If you want to learn more about the D&D characters I've created, comment down below and I will try and make a drawing video all about them and give you their backstory and any little details I can think of from the campaign they were in, and I would love to tell you their stories. I'm getting close to the end of this drawing and I had so much fun creating it, and I feel like thankfully the girls don't fully blend into the background and they also don't blend into each other, so I feel like I was able to really work well with using the art supplies so that they looked different from each other but also not blending into each other. So I think I did really good with the contrast. Thank you so much for watching this whole video, and hopefully it wasn't too boring because I used yellow the whole time. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy. Definitely check out my channel again later for more coloring. Bye!